It started with a single pink flamingo. Just one, standing quietly in my yard, minding its own business. That's when the HOA president showed up and told me it violated community standards. He said it was tacky. He said it hurt property values. He said it had to go. So I removed it. Then I replaced it with two. By the end of the week, there were flamingos on porches, lawns, and balconies all over the neighborhood, because once people realized how petty the rule was, they decided to make a statement. And that's when the HOA realized they hadn't banned a decoration. They'd started a movement. The flamingo wasn't meant to be a statement. I'd picked it up on a whim while shopping for garden supplies. It was bright, cheerful, and just a little ridiculous, in the best way. I stuck it near a flower bed in my front yard, mostly because it made me smile every time I walked past it. The neighborhood itself was quiet and predictable. Neatly trimmed lawns, neutral paint colors, seasonal decorations that appeared and disappeared right on schedule. Nothing offensive, nothing bold, nothing that stood out for very long. I fit in just fine. I kept my yard clean. I followed the rules. I'd lived there long enough to know the HOA cared deeply about appearances, but I'd never had a single issue with them. No warnings, no fines, no emails with aggressive subject lines. That's why I didn't think twice about the flamingo. It wasn't oversized. It wasn't blocking anything. It wasn't flashing or noisy. It just stood there, pink, harmless, and unapologetically cheerful. A few neighbors laughed when they saw it. One waved and said it reminded them of a vacation. Another joked that it was the most exciting thing to happen on our street in months. Then the HOA president noticed. He stopped in front of my house one afternoon and stared at it longer than necessary. He didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He looked concerned. The next day, I got an email. It said the flamingo violated community standards. It said decorative lawn items needed approval. It said I had 48 hours to remove it or face possible enforcement. I reread the message twice. This was about a plastic bird. Still, I assumed it would be easy to clear up. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe once he realized how harmless it was, the whole thing would disappear. I had no idea that one flamingo was about to reveal just how fragile the HOA's sense of control really was, and how quickly something silly could bring an entire neighborhood together. At first, I did what the email asked. I removed the flamingo. I figured it wasn't worth the trouble. It was a novelty decoration after all. I set it in the garage, sent a short reply confirming it had been taken down, and assumed that would be the end of it. But something unexpected happened. That evening, a neighbor knocked on my door holding a drink and smiling. He said he'd noticed the flamingo was gone and asked why. When I explained the HOA complaint, he laughed out loud. He said he'd always thought the rules were overly strict, but banning a pink bird felt ridiculous. The next morning, I noticed something new. 2 houses down, a flamingo had appeared, then another. By the end of the week, there were flamingos popping up all over the street. Some were the classic pink kind. Others were wearing tiny hats. One had sunglasses. Another was positioned dramatically like it was mid-stride. People were having fun with it. Neighbors waved at each other more. Kids pointed and laughed while walking home from school. Someone started a group chat just to share photos of the newest flamingo setups. That's when the HOA president reacted. An email went out reminding residents that unauthorized lawn decor was not permitted. It cited vague language about maintaining community standards and warned that violations could result in fines. Instead of discouraging people, it did the opposite. More flamingos appeared. They showed up in pairs, in clusters, in carefully arranged formations. One neighbor added a small sign that said, "Welcome home." Another put tiny holiday lights around theirs. None of it violated any specific rule. It was decorative, it was temporary, it was harmless. The HOA president began walking the neighborhood more often. He took photos, he made notes, he sent follow-up emails. But every time he tried to single someone out, another neighbor joined in. It became impossible to enforce without addressing half the street at once. I started getting messages from people I barely knew. They thanked me for starting something fun. They said it felt good to push back against a rule that made no sense. One person joked that it was the most united the neighborhood had been in years. The HOA president wasn't laughing. Another email arrived, this one more strongly worded. It said continued violations could lead to board action. It said decor must be removed immediately. It said the matter would be discussed at the next HOA meeting. That announcement only fueled the momentum. People began planning. Some coordinated colors. Others arranged their flamingos in patterns that were clearly intentional but still impossible to classify as offensive or unsafe. Someone even printed a small flyer explaining the Flamingo Appreciation Initiative and left it on a few doorsteps. By the time the HOA meeting rolled around, the flamingos weren't just decorations anymore. They were everywhere, and the HOA president was about to realize that banning one harmless bird had turned into something far bigger than he could control. The HOA meeting was packed. That alone was unusual. Normally, only a handful of people showed up, usually the same faces, quietly nodding along while the board talked. This time, nearly every chair was filled. Some people stood along the walls, others leaned in the doorway, listening. The Flamingos had done something no policy update ever had. They brought people together. When the HOA president opened the meeting, he didn't waste time. He went straight into the issue of unauthorized lawn decor. He talked about maintaining standards. He talked about preserving property values. He talked about how allowing one exception could lead to chaos. Then he tried to single me out. Before he could finish, someone else spoke up. Then another. A neighbor pointed out that the rules never mentioned flamingos specifically. Someone else asked how a plastic bird posed a threat to property values when holiday decorations were allowed every year. Another neighbor calmly asked why energy was being spent on lawn ornaments instead of actual issues like maintenance delays. The questions kept coming. Each one was polite, each one was reasonable, and together they completely dismantled his argument. The HOA president grew visibly frustrated. He tried to regain control, but every attempt only invited another question, another example, another reminder that the rule he was trying to enforce existed mostly in his interpretation. Then someone did the thing he clearly wasn't prepared for. They asked for the exact rule number. He flipped through his binder. He stalled. He offered general language about community aesthetics. But when pressed, he couldn't point to a specific line that banned flamingos or lawn decor like them. The room went quiet. Not awkward quiet. Knowing quiet. That was the moment it became clear. He didn't have a rule. He had an opinion. After a brief pause, another board member finally spoke. They suggested the issue be tabled. They said the rules might need clarification. They recommended no enforcement action be taken until that happened. The motion passed, just like that. No fines, no violations, no forced removals. The flamingos stayed. As the meeting ended, people smiled at each other. A few laughed. Someone joked about adding matching lawn chairs next. The HOA president left early, and outside, under porch lights and street lamps, the flamingos stood quietly, unchanged, undefeated, and somehow victorious. Because in the end, it wasn't about a plastic bird. It was about what happens when people stop quietly accepting rules that don't make sense, and realize they're stronger together than any clipboard ever was. The flamingos didn't disappear overnight. They stayed for weeks. Some neighbors rotated them around their yards. Others added seasonal touches. A few moved theirs closer to the sidewalk, not to provoke anything, but because people genuinely enjoyed seeing them on their daily walks. The HOA never followed up. No fines were issued, no warnings appeared, no new emails arrived. Eventually, the board quietly updated its language about lawn decor. Nothing specific, nothing enforceable. The flamingos were never mentioned again. And slowly, on their own terms, people began taking them down. Not out of fear, not because they were told to, but because the point had already been made. Something unexpected lingered after that. Neighbors talked more. People waved instead of just passing by. There was a sense that the neighborhood belonged to the people living in it, not just to rules written in vague language. As for me, I kept one flamingo. It moved to the backyard, tucked near a garden bed where it still makes me smile. Not as a protest, just as a reminder that sometimes the smallest, silliest things can reveal the biggest truths. Rules matter. Community matters more. And every now and then, all it takes to bring people together is a harmless pink bird and the decision to not take nonsense too seriously.